Hi everybody, Peter Smith here. We're in at the UN in conference room 7. I've got a very dear friend of mine here. Heidi, would you like to introduce yourself and say a bit about how we met and what you do and that sort of stuff?
Hi. Well, as Peter said, I am Heidi Jjensen. I've been working in a ministry context here at the United Nations for about 20 years now.
Christian ministry?
Christian ministry,
Okay.
teaching conversational English and also reaching out to the diplomat community. First through Christian Embassy and now through an organization called Global Service Network, where I see myself as an ambassador for Christ to the United Nations community and English language learners. And so Peter and I met many years ago, probably about 15, 16 years ago, when I was with Christian Embassy, and
He was fast, didn't I?
Yes, and
Still
it
giving you
enabled yes, and it
Free.
enabled me to be able to meet with some of the diplomats here on their ground. That has just been such a blessing. It's also been a great blessing to be able to partner with him when he comes to town to work on these issues.
I think I encouraged you to come to the building a bit more, you and Laura.
Yes, well.
And it was good.
It was. Now I just basically hang out here because in my current position I don't have an office, and I love being here because I'm able to see the diplomats that I'm trying to build a relationship with in their setting. And
You're trying to become part of the furniture.
Yes, and
like me.
When I hear the one student's off in the corner laughing, I go over and joke with them. I, sometimes invite them to coffee or tea if find out what's going on with them. Invite them to the Bible classes that I host. Have lunch in the cafeteria and discuss Bible stories with some of the ladies from West Africa. Some of the men diplomats, I'll meet them and have short conversations and encourage them to come to the Bible classes. And I just see it as...
What sort of reaction do you get? Do you ever get much negative reaction?
Actually, no.
Zero or positive?
There are occasional people that'll shy away from me once I start talking about it. But there is such a respect. Well, they know that I'm a part-time English teacher here, and that is greatly respected, and they love that
you do that for the UN?
I do that for the UN. I am paid by the UN for those classes, but majority of my work is ministry, and so I invite them to these classes, building relationship, and because I have the credentials of teaching with the UN language program for over 10 years now. I can tell them different things about their previous colleagues, what I've learned about their country.
Did you have to do some special training for that?
Oh, I did. I had taught English in Japan for 3 years, and then when I first joined Christian Embassy, I was encouraged to get my master's in teaching English as a second language.
All right.
And then a few years ago, I published a curriculum called with Crew called Eyes to See, Ears to Hear. Campus Crusade. Oops. Yes. I don't know. You should do that. But Campus Crew is the new name of the organization.
That's what they call it.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
In the U.S.
Right. Okay.
So it's Agape in the U.K. So we'll just use Agape from now on.
Fine.
And for about 2014. The curriculum that I wrote using the story of Jesus through the eyes of children was published. It's a faith-based conversational English curriculum, and I use that in my faith-based class for diplomats here at the UN. And I'm also doing some trainings for churches and other programs that want to reach out to the English language learners among us. I like to say it's important that we begin conversations about Jesus with English language learners.
Now, that reminds me, I worked for a Japanese company in Australia for 11 years, and I remember one time I went to Japan, I met this Christian Japanese lady in the office in Japan, and she'd been born in Hawaii, but Japanese parents, and they'd moved back to Japan. And I said to her, why don't you start a Bible study club? Because you have lots of clubs in these big companies. There's 26,000 people worked in it in Japan. And she wrote me back a letter, and she said, because back then this was in the mid 80s, and she said, oh, they wouldn't let me do a Bible study club. They let me do an English conversation club. So I wrote back and said, oh, really? What book are you going to use on the course? She said, oh, the New Testament. Lovely.
Yeah.
So she got to do what she wanted to do with the full approval of the company. And when the Japanese engineer I worked with, Yoshi, when he went back just before he went back to Japan, he noticed I had New Testament on tapes in my company car. And he wanted to buy a copy to practice his English when he was back in Japan. So a Christian chap and I bought him a set of cassettes so he could practice his English with the New Testament on tape.
When?
That was with audio tapes back
Yes.
then. But it's, I mean, and the New Testament's one of the finest pieces of English literature.
It is. It
It
is.
really is.
One of the studies I think that has worked so well with some of the diplomats, I've basically been doing in certain seasons inductive Bible study with I'll give groups 2 different stories, and then they'll do the inductive who, what, when, where, why, and then what's repeated, and then application. And then when they report it to the other group, then we talk about what is common between the 2 stories, what's the difference, and then I have 3 other questions for them to synthesize the material. And honestly, I think that's something that can be done in so many different contexts with English language learners, or to bridge age gaps within a church. You can have the old and the young working together. It's like you get new eyesight for these very familiar stories, for those of us who they are familiar with. For those who aren't, it's fine to, to be able to learn. It doesn't, you don't feel like you're missing the whole boat. You can read the whole story and everyone can figure out the who, the what, the when, the where. And then you have to tell the Christians who know the stories, don't just assume that the why you've always been told is the answer. Look at it with fresh eyes.
I've got a friend in England called George Bell. He teaches English at a high school in Reading. And he gets a lot of the problem boys who just don't fit in. You know what he does with them?
What?
He reads them Old Testament Bible stories. Like Ehud, the left-handed man with the sword, and the fat king, and how he and the fat went over the sword and he escaped, and the kids just love those stories.
Yes.
Because boys enjoy that kind of adventure and daring do, and there's some terrific stories in the Old Testament, and that's what he uses with these kids that just don't fit in, and they'll sit and listen. They're fascinated with these things. So there the Bible's being used as something to use when the kids don't behave themselves. It's something that they take an amazing interest in. Yeah. And your delegates take a great interest in it too.
Yeah. I am always amazed at how much respect I get when I am open and forthright about my faith. I am considerate about them. Honestly, I feel like most of these delegates are so much smarter than me. They've studied, oops.
What happened there?
The lights went out.
Lights went out. Oh, that's okay.
It's just...
we didn't put the money in the meter.
We hadn't moved around enough lately. It's motion.
We didn't do any
all the lights.
Oh, okay.
All the lights go out.
We're back.
Yeah.
We're back. That's
so,
okay. That won't hurt.
Where was I? So that when you're open and forthright about your faith, whereas you have to be respectful.
You don't have to hide it here. I mean, all these Muslim delegates know I'm a Christian. No. I don't hide that. I tell them, you're the same. You say, you're a Christian lady. And that's it. And you're respected for that. In fact, I would say most of them would be suspicious if you said you're a non-believer.
They might be. Yeah. And I think sometimes it's the Christians here who do not know or those from a Christian culture who haven't really grounded themselves in their faith,
too scared to speak up.
That are too scared to speak up, and that willy-wally, I don't know if that's a British wishy-washy, that are wishy-washy in their
neither hot nor cold, lukewarm.
That those are the ones that really struggle to stand firm on what they believe. But honestly, the diplomats here are very hardworking. They don't have their own voice. They have to represent what their government has said. And, you know, there's times when the Christian delegates need to take a stand. Need to, I've had delegates who have asked their ambassador to be excused from presenting some of the things because they didn't agree with it. And sometimes they've been respected for that, and sometimes they've paid the price. But
well, the African Union are basically pro-life and pro-family, and they support what I stand for. It's wonderful. Anyway, that was good. We only had one blackout, so it's been great.
Yes. So thank you for your support of Peter and for your prayers for all of us here at the UN, especially during what's called CSW. I'm sure you've heard about it through Peter. The delegates are working on a lot of issues. The lobbying organizations, Peter's organization is great, but sometimes the pressure the other organizations put are a little too strong. So your prayers are much appreciated.
Thanks, Heidi. God bless.